I'm still remaking my old videos that weren't super great first time around, and this one is actually the third video I ever made about another one of my favorite shows. I know y'all were probably expecting my next video to be superhero related or maybe even Johnny Quest, but we're still keeping it in the Hanna-Barbera family. This one is for all the scammers out there. Every dice game, money laundering operation, or crypto conference probably has a mural of the most effectual who's intellectual. Close friends get to call him TC. I'm kidding, obviously. But what I want to know is Top Cat an excellent depiction of community policing in a non-controversial way, or does it fall under propaganda?
Stop or I shoot!
Later in the video, timecode's on the screen if you're incapable of delaying gratification and want to get right to it. But for everyone else, let's glaze the heck out of this show first. This is Top 10 Hall of Fame, one of the best written Hanna-Barbera shows ever. Probably my favorite, and that's saying something, cause I really don't like cats. Or even cops, if I'm being honest. Like I alluded to at the top, I focus a lot on action and adventure, so when I make stuff like this, it may seem like a sudden left turn, but the foundation of all successful shows in every genre is good characters and well-written stories. I'm an artist and a writer myself, so I'm very big on dissecting what makes for good entertainment that is actually saying something about the state of the world or the human condition. Top Cat was lightning in a bottle in every conceivable way that they were never able to replicate again, even though it got its success much later, but I will get to that. Other classier channels will usually give you a history of animation, then branch into the background of William Hanna and then use all that to lead into this show. Well, don't let the outfit I wore in the original version of this video fool you. This is not a classy channel, and
we don't do that here.
Well, that and most people kinda don't care, if we're being honest. Okay, don't get me wrong, all that stuff is important and I respect it as a fellow creative, but I'm less interested in talking about the unchanging background events and more interested in how it feels to experience it.
That's what she said!
But I will recommend that you check out Back to Hoagie's Alley here on YouTube. They walk you down the whole history of the show, and I think it's important to know just how much care was put into creating such shows back then. Top Cat aired back in 1962, which, if you've watched my previous Hanna-Barbera videos, was a very busy decade for the studio with hit show after hit show. That's more than 60 years in the past, so either I belong in a retirement home or these shows have stood the test of time in ways that modern shows can only dream of. Telling a small, intimate story for a mass market was not a revolutionary concept in the past, but today, everything must be the biggest event ever. And if we're talking all ages appropriate, I have a litmus test for shows and movies. If I can throw it on in front of my extended family and have everyone get caught up in it, it's a classic. And Top Cat is as classic as they come. Intellectually stimulating narratives, very likable characters, and enough fun in there to entertain the kids as well. When I tell you I wanted to live in a trash can when I was a kid because of this cartoon, Top Cat made it look so cool. I mean, look at him in his PJs going through his evening routine. I always imagined what it looked like inside that trash can. It was kind of like that episode of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo where they went into his doghouse and it was actually a mansion through cartoon logic. Maybe the main door was a portal that led them somewhere else, who knows. But while everyone else was wondering what Zaraki Kenpachi's Bankai was, I was all about seeing inside of that trash can. But I will say that was a long time ago. I got over that obsession. I'm not like all these adults scouring the web to see Miss Bellum's face. But if you fall into that camp, I wasn't trying to shame you, and as a matter of fact, I'll do you one better. There you go. You're welcome. So one final disclaimer before we get into the meat and potatoes of this show. There have been a couple of movies made which are easy to find by any means, but they were all kinda terrible, to be honest. I really don't consider them to be the same property as this show because they came off as typical cash grabby IP farming, and if you watch them, you will understand why. They're kind of like that ex-girlfriend or boyfriend who you don't count or acknowledge in your dating history. I'm sure you know what I mean. You're thinking about them right now, aren't you? Anyway, this show had a perfect initial run that I feel very comfortable in saying will never be replicated again, and I'm actually very okay with that. Top Cat's entire canonical existence is only 30 episodes of this show. That's it. That's the end, and I'll die on that hill. And I will fight anyone in the streets who disagrees. The Sesame Streets, of course. Well, okay, listen. There's that one show that TC appears in with other Hanna-Barbera characters, which I'll give a pass, but the rest honestly do not count. The charm of Top Cat to me was always the visual aesthetic. That clean cardboard cutout look that was in the Flintstones as well, the top-notch original voice actors who are irreplaceable, and the score. Whenever you hit perfection, any change you make will just take away from it rather than add to it. They tried to milk the popularity of this property with modern films, but it was very clear that the writers did not understand the charm of these characters or the original show. They tried to elevate the importance of Top Cat's gang to have larger significance over the city as Marvel has done with their friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and they consequently turned them into parodies of their original selves, which is typical when a property gets very popular. It always attracts hack writers who don't understand the property or business people who don't understand creative. They always try to make them canonically as big a deal in the story as they are among fans in the real world, and consequently lose all the relatability that pulled all these fans towards these characters in the first place. Hollywood is honestly full of people who just don't get it, and it frustrates me to no end. So many people who don't understand creative are put in very undeserving positions, but I digress. Let's get back on track. For those who are new to this show, and I don't imagine there's a whole lot of you, let's do a quick round of introductions. The main cast is made up of the titular character Top Cat, who is the smooth-talking leader of the gang.
How could I be so blind? Of course not. That erect posture, that nautical walk. You must be the boss of this dock, right?
Benny the Ball, who is his loyal sidekick.
But I like animals. Some of my best friends are animals.
Benny.
Brain, who is ironically not very smart.
Choo-Choo and Brain, you take the rear door.
Right, rear door.
Where do we take the rear door to, TC?
Choo-Choo, who is the main errand boy.
Choo-Choo, baby, go downstairs and see that they get here right away. I'm starved.
Your slightest wish is my command. Oh, my highness.
And Spook and Fancy Fancy, who I do confuse sometimes, but one likes girls.
You promised never to leave me again.
Honey, baby doll,
There's no one else.
baby. Of course there's no one else.
And the other is all about smooth jazz and cool vibes.
Okay, Spook, what was in that suitcase?
Currency like, various denominations like, money. Like, thanks, Dad. Meatball in a side pocket.
And rounding up the cast is the main antagonist of the show, who is their frenemy, Officer Dribble.
Quit calling me Dribble or I'll run you in.
They were all petty but well-intentioned street con artists just trying to survive, which is a very relatable foundation for a show which the vast majority of people can identify with.
Charlie, you're wasting your time working when we could be lining up some real swinging deals.
Seemed like a good way to pick up a couple of bucks.
Couple of bucks. Can't you ever learn? We're never gonna make any money if you keep taking jobs.
Especially today, my goodness, don't get me started on the global economy. They had very basic distinguishing traits among them in service of comedy and lived in a charming 1960s New York alleyway. There's an obvious Italian-American influence on the show, which you can hear in the way they talk, the way they dress, and the jazzy tunes that played in the background. There were actually a bunch of promos that Cartoon Network ran back in the day with noir detective vibes or Italian mafioso voiceovers that satirically fit the show's petty criminal antics.
They call him TC, very smooth, got the local cops in his pocket. No kidding. Where can we catch these guys? The same place everyone else catches them. Cartoon Network.
It is said his influence reaches the highest levels of government. It is also said that he has assembled some of the most fearsome felines around. Benny the Ball, Brain, Spook, Chew, and Fancy Fancy. He's Top Cat, Don Gatto, Il Capti Tutti. He's tough, he's sophisticated, but he ain't no putty cat. He's Top Cat, and he's only on Cartoon Network. Capiche?
I love world building stuff like that, and it's a shame we don't see much of it these days. It's almost like creativity died out with the original Cartoon Network, or corporate greed fully took over. The show in general is super lighthearted but adjacent to or tangentially influenced by the Italian mafia in New York. You always feel that connection under the surface, especially in the Unscratchables, which was probably my favorite episode. Top Cat and his crew would get into very petty hijinks for survival, but they would occasionally get tangled in high-stakes crime that they really didn't sign up for. There were a couple of episodes as well where new scammers came into town and wanted to take over Top Cat's scamming racket. Initially, they would have one up on him, but things would eventually correct themselves. Officer Dibble was the main antagonist of the show, like Ranger Smith to Yogi Bear, but it was a very playful antagonism like Duck Dodgers and the Martian Commander, or Sonic and Dr. Eggman in Sonic Boom. He can be gullible at times and gets frequently bamboozled by Top Cat's fast-talking snake oil salesman routine.
Never mind the wagon, Sarge. Top Cat did it again. Well, you win again, TC.
But he always came off as a good cop who cared about the community. Even NWA would probably have liked him. Maybe that's pushing it too far. But despite how frequently he busted them, you could always tell he had love for those cats. It was the classic Tom and Jerry frenemy vibe where they would try to get one over on each other, but they never really wanted the other one gone because the dance was either entertaining for everyone involved, or they kept each other in balance so one side never went completely overboard.
I couldn't have done it without Top Cat and his gang, Sergeant. Yes, yes.
And while Top Cat would almost always come out on top, hence the name, there was the occasional Officer Dibble win, which I appreciated.
You gotta let him win sometimes.
I like the random moments when these types of formulaic shows break from expectation. The show in general had a very idealistic picture of what police-civilian relationships should be like, and I loved the community aspect of the show. The occasional scammers and robbers aside, they really did a great job of making this corner of New York look like a neighborhood where everyone cared for each other. Unity and optimism in shows used to be a general vibe in the distant past, be it with the random other business owners or occasional moments when we would see Top Cat and his crew interacting on their own. There was actually a great episode that showcased this when a new rookie cop was posted on Officer Dibble's beat. He had very hardline stances on everything and played a great foil to Officer Dibble. While always seeing Dibble as a stick in the mud, this episode brought about a realization that he actually let a lot of things slide because they were just nuisance laws that did not help the neighborhood.
Unsanitary food storage, unmarked retail prices as required by law.
Hey, what's the matter with you? This is a nice neighborhood.
To my earlier point on community policing, these are the benefits of having cops who are embedded in the communities and are invested in the people that they serve and protect. More on this at the end. Another great episode was when Benny the Ball's mom was paying him a visit and he had lied to her that he was the mayor of the Big Apple.
Like I wrote you, Ma. I'm the mayor of New York.
Top Cat then orchestrated a plan with his crew to give Benny's mother the royal treatment in ways that put him on the hook for several crimes. This was an episode that a lot of people who leave the village or the countryside for the big city can relate to.
Nico, my cousin! I can't believe it, you're here! Welcome to America!
Bravo, Barazzaru! Come in! In your letters to my mother, in your letters to me, all I hear about is Mr. Big, Mr. Roman, living the American dream. I come here, and the only thing big about your life is the cockroaches.
This one, as well as the one where Choo Choo fell in love, were great showcases that Top Cat actually cared about his crew and wasn't just in it for himself all the time. He really went out of his way when his friends had issues that were important to them, and although his crew followed his lead all the time, they were actually capable of checking him sometimes whenever he acted a bit too selfish.
I don't think it's right to hock Officer Dibble's presence.
You explain it to him, Spook.
Not me, man. I don't like the idea either.
Okay, you tell him, Fancy.
Not me, TC. Count me out.
One thing about Dibble though, he came off as a liar. He kept making reference to his wife, but she did not feature in not one frame of animation ever. She was always conveniently unavailable when the camera was there.
Me and the wife are taking a trip for a couple of weeks.
Ain't you high, TC? Mrs. Dibble went to Florida for the winter.
Oh, one thing, Sarge. Would you please call my wife and tell her I won't be home for dinner?
I think Dibble just lied so he didn't look like a loser who was married to his job. I mean, who would admit to be that obsessed over their career anyway, to the detriment of their personal relationships? Like, you'd have to be such a loser to do that. Let's move on. No, but really, this was common with Hanna-Barbera cartoons. They just didn't invest in drawing more characters than they needed to.
Hey, what's that crowd doing in the alley?
Step right up, folks. This is it.
Now back to the propaganda so we can wrap this up. As lighthearted and fun as this show was, I don't think the choice of antagonist as a cop was random happenstance. For a show that aired on primetime in the 60s, which then fell in ratings, but that's neither here nor there. And there is no record of this as the motivation, so I'm purely speculating. But the 60s saw a lot of corruption and misconduct linked to the NYPD, which led to protests and riots across the city. And just broadly, based on the anti-police sentiment around the rest of the country at the time, I don't think it's a stretch to say that somewhere in the back of the minds of William and Joe, the goal of the show, along with entertaining the audience, was to reform police-community relations in the eyes of the public, or at least showcase a functioning dynamic between them. I mean, the show tackled other heavy topics like child abandonment.
Who would leave a baby in a picnic basket?
Abandon a baby. Who would do a thing like that?
Well, I got two choices. I can beg TC to move back in so the captain can have his publicity, or I can commit suicide. But suicide is a felony, and I could lose my job.
So it's not a stretch to think that community policing was also a goal of theirs. As idealistic as it sounds, and I'm sure you can find real-world examples, I think this show can be used as community policing 101 for rookie cops. But to sum it all up, they really don't make them like they used to. I hate to always be down on modern cartoons, but a lot of them don't maintain relevance beyond a couple of weeks, which is why I stick to the classics. They were always focused on the fundamentals of storytelling and entertainment, and that's why this show may not have been as popular as the Flintstones at the time, but it has ultimately stood the generational test of time. It's the kind of show that is a genuine vibe and sure to put you in a better mood than you were when you started it. Let me know which of these cats is your favorite, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Nonsense, my boy. How's he gonna stop us? Remember, I've been using my brain for years. Officer Dibbles is still practically brand new.